Hey fellas, nobody was talking. They was just chilling, whatever, right? And I was just like, man, I don't mean to be rude, but Mike, I just want to know if I could get a picture. And then now I understand. I kind of expected him to say no, so I wasn't mad if he said no. But the way he said it, he said, "Oh hell no."
All right. Well, today I wanted to talk about why parasocial relationships aren't real and some experiences that I've had. Parasocial relationships are an interesting concept coming from someone who's very, very small creator who's also a fan of other YouTubers, famous poker players, famous poker streamers, and a UFC fighter that I've met in person. Through my experiences, I've realized that people aren't always what they come off as in person. I remember back in 2021, I was in Fort Lauderdale. I think I was at this place called American Social, I believe it was. It's kind of like an upscale sports bar in Fort Lauderdale. I was with a buddy of mine that lived down there, and Colby Covington, who is a UFC fighter. I'm a big fan of UFC. I've always enjoyed watching it. I remember he was sitting at this booth with a few people as I was getting a drink from the bar. I personally liked his fighting style, as wrestled growing up, and I believe I think he was like the welterweight interim champion at the time. I can't remember. And Colby is interesting because he has like a shtick where he's like a huge trash talker and he gets under his opponent's skin. But I was just feeling bold that night. And like I said, I was like 5 feet away from him. And I just walked up and I said what's up to him. And it's interesting, like he comes off as like a cocky asshole, like in his press conferences, his fights, like all his like YouTube videos. But he actually turned out to be like a very friendly guy. And like he completely stopped talking to the friends he was with, and just, we talked for probably about 10 minutes. And I remember he asked my name and he just like seemed genuinely interested in the conversation. And he seemed just like a really good guy who likes interacting with, people that are his fans. And I like to think I have a good judge of character. And I honestly thought he was going to be a huge asshole. I thought he was going to kind of blow me off. But he actually turned out to be the opposite. And that made me realize like a lot of times famous people, they have a certain persona online or in the media, but sometimes they turn out to be like way different in person. And up until then, I hadn't really met a super famous person. Outside of, I was actually a senior in high school. My mom and I had gone to Planet Hollywood in Times Square. We were in New York City for a day trip at the time. Funny enough, David Hasselhoff was there. Just like randomly, like we were like, oh, let's go to Planet Hollywood. Like let's get some food there. And David Hasselhoff just happened to be there. And I remember back then I walked up and got his autograph. And I wasn't even really a huge fan of him. I might have saw him in a couple movies back then, but it wasn't really that actually wasn't like really like a big moment for me. In this past year, I had actually competed in a few poker tournaments in Las Vegas. I remember I got second place in a poker tournament locally for about $1,200. And I used that to compete in this WSOP. It's called the mini main event. It was a $1,000 buy-in tournament. And I remember seeing this one like famous poker streamer I used to watch a lot. I still watch him occasionally. His name's Jeff Gross. I actually really enjoy him as a streamer. He basically shows himself like playing hands in like online poker tournaments. And he's pretty entertaining to watch for the most part. And from his streams, he came off as someone who's like pretty chill, pretty outgoing, nice guy. And I remember seeing him as I was leaving the bathroom, like close to the poker tournament. First thing I said to him, I was like, oh, in my head, I was like, oh, I love this guy, like he's a great streamer. And I was like, yo, man, I love your content. And I just didn't realize like he was on the phone. He actually stopped what he was doing. Like he stopped who he was talking to the phone. He asked me my name. We had a quick conversation about like the tournaments. And he shook my hand. Like he was really chill to talk to. Like he completely stopped talking to the guy that he was on the phone with for like, a couple minutes to, stop and chat. And I could tell he was genuinely like happy. I don't know if happy is the word, but he was cool with like, someone who watches him, someone who's like a fan of him, walking up and having a conversation. So that was pretty cool. So that also goes to show that like some people, when you watch them on YouTube or you watch them on TV, sometimes they're exactly, what they are in person is exactly what they portray online. So that was kind of the good case of that. Also, a few years ago, I was thinking about moving to Las Vegas, and there's this YouTuber named Jacob's Life in Vegas. He would make videos on like anything and everything Las Vegas related. So he would talk about hotels, like the Vegas hotels on the Strip, downtown Fremont, living in Vegas, dating in Vegas. I'm going to make a future video about dating in Vegas as a tourist. He would also talk about like nightlife, pretty much everything encompassing Vegas. He talked about it. And I really, really enjoyed his content. Like I was a big fan. Like he was actually one of my favorite YouTubers. And I've been to Vegas so many times, and I definitely credit his earlier videos for kind of getting me hooked on Vegas and, coming there. And I remember he was offering like these, it was like $50 for half-hour consultations on moving to Vegas. And I signed up for one because I loved his content, and I was actually highly considering moving there back then. I probably watched hundreds of this guy's videos over the years. Whenever I was bored, I had some time to kill, and his videos would pop up on YouTube. And he seemed like a real, like, down to earth, chill guy that you would like want to grab a beer with. And I remember being like super stoked to have a consultation. I was like, oh, this is only $50. Like, I get to meet one of my favorite YouTubers, like over Zoom or whatever it was. And I get to like, get some of my questions asked from like a Vegas local who like really knows the area. And I remember when he popped up on the screen, I was like, yo, Jacob, like, good to see you. Like, love your content. Been watching it for years. I remember he had this, like, it was kind of took me back, but it was like, I remember he just had like this blank expression on his face. Like, he didn't smile. Like, it was like he had no emotion towards like what I was saying. Like, I was obviously like excited to be there to, talk to him. And he like nodded his head and said like he didn't say like, oh, thanks, or, oh, good. He just said like, should we get started? And I was kind of disappointed, to be honest. I was like, yo, this is like Jacob's like one of my favorite YouTubers. And that's definitely when I realized like the one-sided nature of parasocial relationships. Like, he answered the questions that I had on Vegas. But I could tell it was like he did not even want to be there. Like, that these types of consults, it was like I almost felt it was like more for pure revenue and like much less about interacting with subscribers. And like, that's cool and all, but I was just excited. I was just excited to meet him, and it sucked that like his body language just kind of screamed that he would rather be doing like other things. And like, I'm still a fan of his content. But that definitely made me realize like the one-sided nature of parasocial relationships is fucking real. Like, you may be a fan of these creators, but they aren't a fan of you. Like, they don't know you. And depending on like who they are as a person, like how they are as a person, people like, Colby, Jeff, and those stories, like some people will be really cool and they'll be like, genuinely like interested in conversation. Other people, like, they don't give a fuck. And like most recently, back in November, I had competed in this poker tournament called the NAPT main event. It was in Las Vegas. I had won what was called a gold pass, which like got you into the tournament with your buy-in covered. And I'm a fairly like intermediate poker player that just really enjoys the game and just had a decent amount of success when I've played small tournaments, but nothing like too notable, nothing too crazy. And when I was walking around like outside of the tournament room, I remember seeing this guy Eric Seidel. Like, Eric Seidel, he's like one of the world's best poker players. He has like $50 million in like live tournament earnings. Like, I used to watch him on like Poker After Dark, like all the poker shows. Like, he would be playing with like all the other famous poker players like Negreanu, Phil Ivey, Phil Hellmuth. Like, I genuinely like watched this guy a lot. Like, I was like pretty big fan. And I remember he sat a few poker tables. He sat like a few tables over for me. We're in the same tournament. I remember him seeing him in the hallway outside the tournament room, and I was walking the same direction. And on like it was dinner break, and I remember I told him, I was like, "Hey man, I'm a big fan." Like, just very casually, like as I was walking by. He's probably heard that a million times, and I remember him just like kind of looking at me with a dead expression on his face. He's like, "Thanks." And he's like an older guy too, so I wasn't like expecting like a conversation like maybe like a younger poker player. But it's just kind of funny. But when you're a fan of somebody, like, and you see them like in real time, you're like excited. You're like, oh, this is like a big moment. And then, but to that other person, like you're just some random person that they have no connection to. And I think that's the key thing to remember with parasocial relationships. I think with parasocial relationships, they're interesting because you're expecting the person to be a certain way to fit how you feel about them. But most of the time, they're pretty different than what you would expect. I think it also depends on the moment you speak with them. You know, if they're in a good mood, they're probably more likely to shoot the shit, and vice versa. If they're not having a good day, they're definitely less likely to kind of, you know, give you the time of day. Just also goes to show that most of these people that you're a fan of, they're just regular people who are just trying to get through life, and you shouldn't get too attached to someone you're a fan of because these people, they're not thinking about you. They don't know you. They don't know you exist. They don't have a connection with you. I also think it also depends on the type of person they are. So some well-known people really do like genuinely enjoy interacting with their fans, their viewers, and they get like a sense of joy in it, like that what they've created or, you know, what they're good at, you know, people appreciate. And other people, they don't really enjoy interacting with, you know, viewers and, you know, people that are, you know, and fans, as they may look at their viewers and fans as like a money-making opportunity. Like it's more for business, and they don't really enjoy the act of, you know, fans speaking with them. And, you know, maybe they did at some point, like maybe these people that, you know, aren't so, you know, cool to their fans, like maybe they enjoyed it at first, but it got old after a while. Maybe they didn't enjoy the intention. Like you never know what it is. Like I'm not here to judge. It really comes down to that individual. But as a very small creator, if you ever see me, feel free to say hi and we can shoot the shit about whatever. Well, if you've enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like. Feel free to comment down below your experience with parasocial relationships, and feel free to subscribe. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care.